This is the jpeg2RAW podcast. I'm Mike Howard. I'm broadcasting from the basement of Knob Studios here in sunny and hot Atlanta. jpeg2RAW is a photography podcast for the amateur photographer. You can find us on the web at www.knobstudios.com, and you can contact the show by emailing us at podcast@knobstudios.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Flickr, and Twitter by searching for jpeg2RAW, or just follow the links on our website. This is the jpeg2RAW podcast, and I'm your host, Mike Howard. And tonight I am joined by Tim. And Tim, help me with your last name.
Kemperle.
Tim Kemperle. Tim, how you doing tonight?
Very good. How about yourself?
I'm doing fine. How's the weather up there?
Much better than it was yesterday. We had a hailstorm and some really bad weather yesterday up here.
We don't have any rain today or yesterday, but we are hitting the high 90s for the first time this season. You know, we've been in the mid to low 90s, and today I think we're supposed to get up around 98, and tomorrow could be 100, 101 down here in the Atlanta area.
Wow, we were hotter than that up here in New York 2 weeks ago. We were in the hundreds.
Yeah, I cannot wait for fall to get here. This is too hot. My electric bill is costing too much money. So, Tim, I think tonight we're going to talk about taking photos while we're on vacation, traveling, and that type of thing. But before we get started into that, Tim, why don't you give us a little bit of a background on how you got into photography?
All right. Well, I'm 44 years old, and when I was a young kid, my father took a lot of pictures. I used to be in a church choir. My father was always the person that was out there taking pictures, to the point where when my father would show up, some of the other kids would always like fake taking pictures, always make fun of it, and kind of annoying. But as I got a little bit older, you started realizing how many people wanted copies of the pictures that my father had taken that nobody had, because nobody was taking pictures. He also took audio recordings. So it was all the things that people made fun of. They realized down the road, now they wanted it. Now they wanted all those pictures from when we were singing, whether it was at the church or even when I sang for the Pope at Shea Stadium at the time. There were pictures there that nobody had, that they were pleased that now they could get copies of. So when I got up to probably about 20 years old, I got a job where I was able to afford to buy a camera, and I went out and bought myself a Minolta Maxim camera based on a camera a friend of mine had at work. So I started taking pictures with that. A lot of the pictures I would take was on automatic. Slowly over time, that was a film camera. Obviously, I was taking a lot of pictures. Couldn't afford all the film, but I still took a lot of pictures. If I'd go on vacation, I would take 10 rolls of film and just take a lot of pictures. But I didn't really learn a lot about taking pictures until I went to digital, probably around 2005 when I got my first digital SLR, where now I was able to look, how did I take the picture? Mm-hmm. What can I do to improve taking the picture? And then I could take as many pictures as I wanted to, which helped learn. If I didn't like the picture or if it didn't come out well, it was easy to delete it. And having the LCD on the back of the camera, it made it to the point where I could take pictures and see what I took right away, so I could tell whether I did something right or wrong.
Yeah, that is a huge advantage. I never really was into film, but being able to see that and have all that stuff recorded, all your shooting information recorded in that file, just really helps you learn much, much faster.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And before you keep going, I want to go back to the point you made about your dad taking those photos, and back whenever you were younger. And everybody wanting them now. I had a similar thing where I'm on Facebook, as just about everybody else is on Facebook, and I'm connecting with these friends from grade school, from kindergarten to fifth grade, connecting with all these friends. And I asked my mom, "Hey, do you have any photos from back in that time?" And fortunately, she did. She scanned them for me, and she sent them to me, and I put them up on Facebook. I probably connected with another 10, 15 friends as each person started, going in there and tagging everybody, and it's really something. Everybody loved seeing those photos from first grade, second grade that really none of us had. My mom fortunately had those, and if it wouldn't have been for that, none of us had those photos anymore.
Absolutely, and a lot of what I'm actually starting to do is going through all my old pictures, and I have shoe boxes upon shoe boxes of pictures, and that doesn't even go into what my father has, and he's got a lot of slide film as well, because I guess in the 60s it was probably cheaper to take slide pictures versus actually developing it, and I'm going to actually send them out to get scanned in and made into digital pictures, because to scan them in at home, I don't have the time to do that.
Yeah, no, I think that would take a long time. I don't think I have a scanner that could scan all the film.
No,
do you need a special scanner for that?
Well, most of the new flatbed scanners will work with it. It just takes a long time. It'll be if you're going to do it by the best way to be is by the negative,
okay.
But that takes a lot of time. You're talking 5 minutes per picture. If you got hundreds of pictures, I don't have the time for that.
No,
and most people don't. I'd like to think I do, but it just doesn't happen.
No, I mean, if you have a lot of them, it could just take you forever.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead. I think you were talking about when you got your digital.
Well, I wound up getting a digital camera. Like I had said, I had a Minolta Maxim, which I really liked. I'd gotten very comfortable with the camera. And then around 2005, I was going to go over to Europe for a vacation into Germany. And I said, you know what? If I'm going to take pictures, I wanted to get into a digital camera. And at the time, Minolta didn't have one. Canon had a digital camera, Nikon had one, and there was nothing by Minolta. So I actually wrote a letter to them at the time asking them if they were going to have it. Otherwise, I was going to switch over to a different brand. But I didn't really want to do that because I had a lot of lenses, which I had invested a lot of money in the lenses over the years. I did not want to say, well, now I'm going to buy all new equipment. Because I think that's the biggest thing with a camera. Once you invest in a system, you're pretty much locked into it. So I wound up getting the digital camera. At the time, it was a Minolta Maxim 7D. It was an excellent camera for the time frame. I had never really thought that a digital camera was going to rival what a film camera could do, but the camera did just as much. If anything, the hardest part was the definition for like the highs and lows with a bright scene versus a dark scene. You might lose some clipping in a digital camera versus what you're losing in a film camera. But today's cameras, they've made such great strides in that my newest camera, I got a Sony A700, which uses all my Minolta lenses.
That's awesome.
It's much better, much better. And I stayed with Sony because they bought out the Minolta line.
Yeah, and I'm partial to Nikon, and I've normally recommend Nikon or Canon, but it's good to hear somebody who's gone, Minolta. I looked very strong at the Minolta point and shoot. I think it was. Might have been. Was that 7D a point and shoot, or was that an SLR?
No, it was an SLR. It was their first SLR.
Okay, so it wasn't that one. It was something else. They make great cameras too. The Sony and the Minolta make great cameras. Now, how's their lens selection? Because I know on the Canon and Nikon lens selection is just humongous. Yeah,
they have a decent lens selection. I got probably my favorite lens that I take pictures with is a 16-105 right now. The one area that it's probably its weakest is on the 2.8 lenses, which I'd really like to get into with the wide open apertures so that you can take more low-level lighting. Canon probably has the best lens selection, followed by Nikon. They're getting along Sony, but some of the lenses that come out like that are very expensive, and I don't have the free cash for that.
Right.
But I got a wide selection of lenses. I have an 85 1.4, which is great for portraits. It gives a great depth of field to blur out the background. And then I have a 100 400, which I use for sports. For when my son's playing soccer, that's a great lens, but I only use that one for sports photography because it's a really big lens, but it can zoom you in right on top of the action then.
Yeah, right. And you said 85 1.4?
Yes.
Yeah, I have an 85 1.8, and I love that lens, and really love to get the 1.4. Just not quite there yet with the cost, but the 85. I always tell people to get the 50 because it's so cheap. On the Canon and Nikon, I'm not familiar with it on the Sony side. The
same thing, yeah.
The 50-1.8 is right around the $100 range, and it's an excellent lens. A lot of times, if I have a little bit more room I can play with, I'll switch over and I'll use that 85. I just like the 85 even better, but it is a bit more expensive. Even the 1.8 on the 85 is going to be $350, $400.
Yeah, I think the mine is around $750 I paid.
Yeah, I think for the 1.4 on the Nikon side is at least that. It may even be closer to $1,000. which is an expensive lens unless you're going to be using it a lot.
Well, I'll tell you, the only bad thing with the digital versus now, I had that 85-1.4 on a film camera, and it was really great because it zoomed into a really pleasing composition. But now when I went to the digital, the sensor on the camera multiplies that by a 1.5, so it's really now about a 120 lens. So you really got to stand a lot further back. So I actually wind up I have a 51.7 for portrait photography. A lot of times I wind up using that lens instead.
Yeah, and what you're talking about is the sensor size on a lot of the digital cameras, SLRs, especially on the point and shoots, but we're talking here on the digital SLRs, is not a full frame sensor as equal to a film camera. So it has like it doesn't really zoom in, but it crops the center part. Now there's some benefit to that too, because now you're using the sweetest part of the lens, the best part of the lens. The outside edges of a lens is usually its weak point. So when you're cropping the center part of a lens, you're actually getting the best part of the lens. And for your sports photography, you're actually getting a little bit more cropped down image there, so that's good too. The downside, of course, like you said, is a lot of those lenses, if you're used to their focal length on a film camera, you're not going to have that same focal length on a digital. But now there's digital cameras that are full frame, so
yeah, they're a little bit those are really on the expensive side.
Yeah, I would love to get the Nikon D3 or D3S, and those I think start at $4,500.
Yeah, that's probably about triple what I'm willing to pay for a body.
That's the thing. My D2X is working good enough. It's going to have to last a while longer. Well, let's get into the main subject here, and that is travel photography. You are taking photos while you're traveling, on vacation, whatever else. You go down to a special place. How many times a year?
I go to Disney at least pretty much once a year now. Recently, It's been up to 2 times a year.
Okay, and you're coming from the New York area, right?
Correct, New York, Long Island.
So I imagine you're having to fly.
I fly every time, yes.
Okay. Now, you're probably better at this than me, because I am a horrible packer, and I can stuff stuff into a suitcase, but I tend to, on a 2-day trip, bring 7 days worth of clothes. And, that is fine when I'm traveling in a vehicle and can junk all that stuff in there. So from a photography standpoint, I'm not good about narrowing down what I'm going to take. I take just about everything. How do you handle what you're going to take with you? Because you're taking an SLR, right?
I take an SLR, and I take quite a bit with me also. And I'm probably an overpacker like you. And at the beginning, when I used to take my photography equipment, I probably took 80% what I owned. But I don't do that anymore. I've realized a lot of things I don't even take into the park, or I'd keep it in a camera bag with me and didn't use it. So I've kind of narrowed it down to what I bring. I obviously bring my camera body with me. The main lens I use is a 16-105 while I'm down in Disney. That's probably on the camera 80% of the time. The other 2 lenses, and I only bring 2 other lenses, the 50-1.7 and the 85-1.4, and those I don't even bring into the park every day. The 50 I'll always have with me because it's a very small lens to carry. I'll usually have a flash with me, and I have one of the better flashes made by Sony, the FL5800, which is a very good lens, good flash, which covers a lot of area. But during the day, I don't bring it out, as the body of the camera has the onboard flash, which is probably the best thing to have. I use it for fill flash all the time. A lot of times what I will bring with me into the park, though, is either a monopod or a tripod. There's a lot of times where either you're at a parade, the fireworks, definitely at night you're going to need it. And you're going to want to take pictures at night within the parks. Between the lighting of the park, the fireworks, parades, you're going to need to have something that you can lean on. There have been times where I didn't have a tripod with me, and I would lean up against the pole if I could, but you're going to want to have a tripod.
Yes. I'm sorry, go ahead.
And the one thing that I bring with me that's probably more important than everything else, I bring a backpack with me, and it's a Tamarack backpack that holds on the bottom my camera, my lenses, the flash, and on the top pack, it's almost more like a backpack where you can store stuff. Now I have in there a spare battery and extra flash cards, but I also have a jacket for my son. I can get a couple of little things in there. So it's a small bag. It's very comfortable because it's on both shoulders, and you're not going to put it down. And when you go on the rides, you can put it around your legs as well. Okay,
yeah. JC out in chat asked, what lens did you say you use most when you're in the park?
It's a 16-105 lens, so it's a zoom lens. The low end is a 16, which is great for getting a very wide-angle lens. My old lens was a 24, but since it's now the digital with the crop sensor, the 16 kind of opens it up wide. And then the 105 on the high end, there's really no reason to go beyond that. There's nothing you really want to get that's far away that you can't then zoom in later on with the with post-cropping on the computer.
Right. So I'm not sure that lens is available on the Nikon side. 16, yeah, that's pretty decent wide on the wide end, and the 105, that's a good range there.
It's a very good range.
Yeah. Now, right now, only for those who've come to the live show out in chat, and I'll probably put some of this in the show notes afterwards. But we're looking at one of Tim's shots of the magic. What is that called?
That's the castle in the Magic Kingdom.
The castle in Magic Kingdom.
Cinderella's castle.
And that's one of your fireworks shots. Now, did you take that on a tripod, or
that was on almost certainly on a tripod.
Yeah, and I got several other of your fireworks shots that I was thinking when I saw these, like there's a little bit of delay from whenever I click the button to when you see it here. But this next one coming up is another fireworks shot, and I thought there's no way he's hand-holding these. These look like they have to be on a tripod. So when I've been to Disney twice, and it's a pretty crowded place. Now you can see the one out here in chat. How are you handling setting a tripod up? Has that been a problem with people running into it, or?
Actually, doing it a couple of times now, I've gotten, I don't want to say experience at it, but you start realizing where you can stand. The last time I stood on Main Street, and I was up against a garbage can, so I actually had two legs on the ground, one leg on the side of the garbage can, so that nobody could stand in front of me. They weren't going to bump into me, and somebody still bumped into you once in a while because it's dark out, obviously. Yeah. And another time, I stood right behind a vendor cart, so they weren't going to move. I knew nobody was going to stand in front of me, but at the same time, I was blocking the camera. Now, there were plenty of people that would stand next to me, look at the pictures I was taking to see what I was doing, because I'm not the only one that goes down there with a tripod. You think it's kind of crazy going into Disney with a tripod.
Yeah.
But you actually see probably a half dozen, maybe a dozen people with a tripod at night.
Okay. And I only have the one tripod. I have a whatever it's called. I can't remember the name of it, but it's carbon fiber. It's got a not really big, really right stuff ball head on top of it. It's a Gitzo tripod.
Okay.
And it's a pretty heavy combination, that big ball head. I don't know if you've ever seen the Really Right Stuff ball head, their big one, and this tripod is pretty heavy. How do you have one that you take just for Disney? Is it a smaller, lighter one, or what?
I actually wound up buying I think it's a Slick SLIK, more of a travel one. It will go up to 60 inches, but it's a lot lighter. I also have a very heavy tripod. And in the first year, I think I actually did bring it with me. I had it in a suitcase. And then when I was going to go out to the park, I was not a chance in the world am I going to bring that into a park. So I wound up leaving it there, never using it that year. So I wound up buying another one for the following year or the following trip to use. And I can lash it onto my my backpack. It's on behind me at the bottom, and it's perfect.
Yeah. Okay, so the tripod goes where? Say that again.
It mounts to the bottom of my camera bag.
Okay. Now, what happens when you go to get on a ride?
One of two things. My mother-in-law usually comes down with us, and she doesn't go on rides.
Okay.
So since she's not on rides, she gets to hold it. Or I can take everything onto a ride with me. Most of the rides at Disney are not very intense. So I take it. Since it's a backpack, I wrap it around my legs, in between my legs, and I've never had an issue with it. And Disney doesn't say anything. They don't have a problem with it.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Now we're looking at another one of your shots, another firework one, and I love firework shots. Now the other thing, it's not coming through too clear here in this image, and it's probably because of the way we're broadcasting it. But you're also getting in the foreground other people who are taking photos of this same event, and you can see some of them are using camera phones and other things. And I think that's interesting too in this shot. You got not only the fireworks, but you got the people who are being illuminated by those fireworks, and you can see some of those.
I always think it's amazing when I see people take pictures like this with a flash. Now, a lot of people don't know how to take nighttime pictures, and it's not the easiest to do. I mean, I took a lot of pictures. My wife probably makes more fun of me for the amount of pictures I have of the castle at night than anything else.
Yeah.
Because I probably have 1,000 pictures of the castle, probably more. And every time I go down there, I probably take another 100 because they change the castle every couple of minutes to a different color. So, of course, I'm taking more pictures of it.
Yeah, and if you're, this is me too, but I never feel like that's the image. I've now got the perfect image. I always feel like I can get something else. So even if you photographed, the castle, 100,000 times, you never know when you're going to get another shot that is like, wow, no, that's now my favorite. You did bring up a good point about, you're taking these fireworks shots. You're there, and you got people who are taking their camera and knocking off the flash, hitting the flash on their camera to take these firework pictures. And I don't know if their camera's just doing it auto or if they really think it's doing anything when you're probably 200 yards or more away from the castle.
Yeah, probably about 200 yards.
And their flash probably went 10 feet
at best.
And it didn't do anything. The only thing it did was illuminate a few feet in front of you. It didn't really add anything to it. So it's all about the shutter speed here.
Correct. Right? When I take these pictures, the good thing about an SLR camera is I put it onto full manual. I'll stop the aperture down between f8 and f16 and put the shutter speed to bulb, and I have a remote shutter release so that when I'm taking the picture, what I actually look for when I take the picture is when the scene is dark, before there's any fireworks in the sky, you'll see the fireworks on its upward trail, and that's the one that's going to burst next. So now you can see, like, all right, there's another one that's going to come up, or another 2 or 3. I'll open up the lens at that point, so before the firework actually goes off, it's exposed. And then right about 2 to 3 seconds after that, I'll release the shutter so that it closes, and that's when you get the shot like this. You can't be taking these with your finger on the shutter because you're going to shake. You can't put it for a 2-second exposure because there are some points where you might get nothing, or there's other points where you're going to get so much light in there it's going to blow out the entire scene.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's good to know. I think one thing with that is just practice.
Exactly. That's why I take a lot of pictures of the castle.
Yeah. Now I don't know if you can see the one I just put up. It looks like your son and the tea kettle ride.
Correct.
And this, when I was going through them, for whatever reason, this was one of my favorites when I was going through your photos. And it's all about his look. He is absolutely loving the ride. And whoever went on the ride with him, was that you?
That's me.
Yeah. And so you obviously took your camera on the ride, and you get the feeling of the action that's going around.
Yeah, this is one ride that I probably practice taking pictures on more than ever. There's a couple of ways you could take this. Whether you take it on a program shot where it's going to show, because this is obviously the fill flash from the on-camera flash here. It fills him in to get the screen. But what I like about these pictures is the background's also exposed. And what I do is I stop down the shutter speed so that it's a little bit longer. The flash will stop him, but at the same time it exposes the back so that you have a pleasing frame where it's not dark in the back, and it also shows a little sense of motion. I had another one, I don't know if I had sent it to you, where it was probably my wife and her sister, where the background is completely moving, and it just gives that sense of motion. He stopped in there, you can see him, but at the same time, you know that the ride's moving. It's not the beginning of the ride. It's actually on the ride at the same time. Yeah, no, I got the definite sense it's moving. You can make out some people in the background. You can see they're moving. And you brought up a number of things I want to go back over there. Because in this scene, for the people who are watching and listening to this afterwards,
His son is in the tea kettle ride at Disney, and behind him there's a strong light. So I think if you'd have taken this without flash, without the settings you just did, that light that's back behind you, which is outside the ride, I'd imagine, is going to overpower the entire shot, and that is going to blow that out, and he's going to be completely dark.
Correct. You wouldn't even see his face.
Yeah. So what you did here is you did the flash, and a flash goes off so fast. And that's going to expose him and give him the proper exposure and do much better job of matching his exposure to that exposure back in the background, so you don't have that big blowout, and also help stop his action.
Correct.
Yeah. So and I can see in his eyes, the one you can see that there's some flash there. It adds, a flash adds that little sparkle in the eye.
Right. That little catch to his eye.
Yeah. And that, to me, without, a lot of times if you don't have that, the eyes look somewhat dead. In this photo, his eyes look alive, and he's got a huge smile on his face and just loving the ride.
And usually I like when he's looking at the camera lens. This is one of those pictures where you're almost better off that he's not looking at the camera.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he's looking a little off center. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe the person next to you, or just looking at out at the ride. I don't know.
Yeah, he might have been looking at my wife in this picture, and it's hard to get those pictures.
Now, personally, I would never get on the tea kettle ride because I get seasick, and that would just, I could not do that. My wife and my kids love those kind of rides, but I can't stand the spinning. And now we're looking at one, and I picked this one because of the shot that's next, actually. And I was wanting to ask you if you did this one also because of this. It looks like the merry-go-round's behind him.
Correct. This is actually in one of the hotels. That's actually a gingerbread ride. Okay. Disney at Christmas time in the deluxe hotels, they create some gingerbread houses. And one of them, it's a huge house. They actually sell gingerbread cookies inside the house that's completely made of gingerbread. And this is another one of those shots where it's a slow shutter speed, but at the same time the flash goes off to expose him, but at the same time expose the background. Because otherwise he would be exposed, and the background you wouldn't see at all.
And I think I need to do in a future post on the site something about flash and how it stops action. I think that's a concept that is hard for some people to grasp. And when I first got into photography, I was like, what are you talking about? I can go with a 1/60 shutter speed and the flash is going to stop the action. How does that work? And what people don't realize is that flash is going off at incredibly fast speeds. So if you have the aperture, the exposure right, when that flash is going to stop it, and one of the stop the action. The way I learned, the way it clicked for me when I understood it, is I went and got a fan. And I took the fan, I took my camera to the highest shutter speed it would go to that I could get from an exposure, and tried to stop the motion of that fan with just the shutter speed. And I could not do it. I can get it close, but it's still a little blurry. And then I set the shutter speed to 1/30, turned on the flash, and hit it, and bam, it was frozen solid.
As if it was turned off.
As if it was turned off. And I was like, holy crap! What is going on here? I do not understand it. And,
did I lose you, Mike?
No, I'm still here. Did you hear me? You hear me?
Yeah, for a second there, I thought I lost you.
No, and that's what clicked for me. Now, another thing I can tell in this image is that you're shooting with an SLR, because generally you wouldn't have that blurred background like you do here with a point and shoot. Point and shoots have a lot more range that's in focus. And in this case, he's in such good focus when the background is blurred out. Now, let's see if I can find this next one. And this one coming up is a picture of a close-up of that horse that's behind him on the
correct
merry-go-round. And I was wondering if the whole point of this picture was the name of the horse.
Exactly. My son's name is Jack, and I saw the horse go by with the name Jack, and I was like, all right, Jack, you got to stand here. I got to get a picture of you with the horse. But then when I realized after I took it, it stopped down the shutter speed enough, and the depth of field was so off that you couldn't read the name, so I had to take the extra picture just of the horse as it was going by.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. And another thing I noticed in a lot of your photos, and this is something that I have to remember, is as you're going out to these wonderful places at Disney and everything, is don't just take photos of the scenes, of the fireworks, of all the wonders at Disney. Take photos of you and your family in those settings.
One of my favorite pictures that I always try to take, and I don't know if I had sent one of them to you, is I'll try to get my family or my son, my wife and son holding hands, walking in front of me, away from me, with maybe the castle in the background, but them walking. So now they're not looking at the camera, and it kind of shows the sense of them at Disney as opposed to them posing at Disney.
Yeah. And it's going to go one more here. There. And you see that one? That looks like you and your son, so obviously someone else taking a picture and enjoying somebody's birthday.
Yeah, that was my birthday.
Okay. So you had your birthday down at Disney?
I had my birthday in Disney. I never thought that would happen.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And that's nice to take pictures of the family while they're there. And that's something we got to remember as when we go on these vacations, is to take pictures of the family. Because what's sad is, as I look through some of mine, let's see if I can get to one of my favorites. And I have some here on my family I'll show too. One of my favorites is one coming up here. It takes a while to scroll through it. And I often get asked, who are these people in this photo? And I don't know who they are. There's nobody I know. And I just went past that one. And to me, that one almost looks like a postcard in this, saying who's the dude in the yellow jacket? And it's a picture. We're at Disney's private island. It's Disney's, ship, whatever ship it is, in the background. And there's a beautiful sky, and there's a beautiful ocean, and there's these few people that are in the scene. And I guess I could have cloned them out, but it actually adds to it, I think.
I think it adds to the picture. No, yeah. You want them in that picture.
But I have no idea who these people are.
It's a good thing they're facing away, otherwise you would have needed releases.
Yeah, if I wanted to sell it. But yeah, it is a good thing they're facing away. And, I do, as I talked about on show number 2, I do have some photos on iStock. But, this one I obviously could not use because it is the Disney ship in there, and they would never give me a product release to sell their ship.
No.
And any of those people who were where you could make them out, I'd have to have something there. And I'll show a few more, like this one coming up. Over the years, my kids have gotten used to, or had to endure, me taking photos of them all the time. And as you can see in the one coming up, my son was starting to get a little aggravated with me, continue to take photos of him while we're on the cruise. How does your family, do they just come to accept it?
To a point. And then my son Jack could be like, Dad, not another picture. And then he'll start making faces exactly like this, where I don't want to be in pictures anymore. And if I'm going to be in pictures, it's going to be a silly face picture or a grumpy face picture. It's going to take a while before he actually gives a nice picture.
Or put their hand up in front of the camera. That's one of the things they do a lot for me is, actually this one where what it is my son making this really mean looking face at me. Hey, that's great. Do more of that. I'll take pictures of that. They actually, they make a good facial expression there.
Actually, I like it. It's character.
Yeah, it's character. What's not good is when they put their hand up in front of the camera.
My son last night we went to a Met game, and I went to take a picture of him, and just as the flash went off, what did he do? He put his hand up. Yeah,
and that really just destroys the image. There's not much you can do there, and who wants a picture of somebody's hand out of focus?
Yeah.
So it is something to deal with, because sometimes on vacations, people's they get whatever high strung and wore out, and you got to back off sometimes. And other times, you just take pictures whenever they're not even paying attention, or find other creative ways to do it.
And those are sometimes the best pictures when they're not paying attention.
Yeah. And this next one is something I was trying. It didn't quite work out. I think I have another one here I'm going to show that I is trying. Since it's digital, just try all kind of different things. You never know when something's going to work. This is probably a one that didn't really work that well. It's on the balcony of our cabin on the cruise. And I wanted to get my son as a silhouette and the sun set or rise, I don't remember which one this is, back there in the background. and it didn't work quite as well as I wanted. He was a little bit too much of a silhouette. But it's free. Oh, and somebody's telling me in chat I like this shot.
Actually, I agree. I like this shot here. He doesn't need to be in focus. It tells you what it is, but at the same time, it's a very pleasing. This is like, I think I sent you some pictures of what I call the blue hour, where you get that deep blue sky. Yeah. And you don't have much time in the night to get those pictures, but they're really good.
Yeah. And I'm not sure if you sent me somewhere I got those. All these are ones I picked, so I may not have picked the right ones that you wanted me to pick. But, it's something to go through. And here's another scene of me trying something. Is we were on a boat ride, a speedboat ride around the Bahamas on the cruise, and we were getting drenched. They put us in the back of the boat, the back of the speedboat, and what that did was, as they go fast, the water from the front just poured in on us.
Over, yeah.
We were drenched from that. But it was actually fun. It was warm out and it was relaxing. I did have to be very careful with the camera because I didn't want it to get drenched. So I think in this scene, while I got a part of my arm there, I had the camera, down, basically almost at my knees, maybe a little bit lower, and just was pointing it upwards toward my son, who was looking down at it and just snapping away, and got a couple of them that were decent there. And that's just try stuff. I sometimes will go out before while the family's getting ready, around the hotel and see what I can shoot there, or afterwards I will shoot there because my family doesn't always want to wait around as I take photos while they're on vacation.
I know the feeling.
I guess when you're at the castle and you're taking fireworks, it's the rest of the family's going to want to hang out and watch the fireworks too, so you have some time there.
That's true. They usually want to be and when you go for the fireworks pictures, you actually have to line up almost an hour to an hour and a half early because the crowds will start really building up. So if you want to get a good shot or a good location, you got to get there really early. And they'll have a parade that goes on before that. So now you got the additional time to prepare from a parade. So I'll take pictures of the parade, and usually those pictures don't come out good because they're moving shots with the parade's obviously moving. The lighting is very dark. You don't really want to use a flash for that, but without a flash, you don't really get a good shot either. So usually my parade shots don't come out the best. But you got to get there early. My family is making fun of me because I'm taking castle pictures upon castle pictures, but I usually feel like I get a good picture, and I enjoy doing it. And if I get one good picture out of 10, 15 out of the fireworks, I'm pleased because a lot of them are not going to come out good.
Yeah. So now you go down there and you're there for whatever length of time. Do you how are you storing all these images? Do you bring something to your laptop or something to get them off your card at night or something?
Yeah, I'll usually bring a laptop with me and copy them over. This time I actually went out and bought myself an additional 16 gig card so that I can get a lot more on there. And with even with RAW, I think I was able to get about 1,000 shots on it. So that was enough.
And that's a 16 gig card is a nice size card. I have a 16 gig, and my D2X is between 12 and 13 megapixel. So even with a raw image, I can get 700-800 images on one card. So that's pretty good. I mean that is definitely going to last me the day.
Exactly. If you're taking 700-800 a day, boy, you're taking a lot of pictures.
Yeah, and the downside of taking all those pictures is you eventually got to go through them. So do you wait till you get back home, or are you going through them at night?
Sometimes I'll look at them during the day, and obviously if there's anything that you think is out of focus, and I'll zoom in on the picture on the camera. If it's out of focus, I get rid of right away. Or if the exposure is really bad, I'll get rid of. Then at night, I'll go through them once if I have the chance. Sometimes I don't have the chance if we get home really late. But most of the time, probably 80% of the editing is done at home. My laptop I usually bring is my work laptop, so I don't have Lightroom on it. I do all of that at home on my home PC.
Okay, so you get back home and you bring it all into Lightroom, and we hadn't discussed that yet, but you use Lightroom.
Correct.
And you did mention you shoot in RAW. And Lightroom, I've mentioned this before, but Lightroom makes it so much easier to shoot RAW. And I think you were like me in that before Lightroom, you were shooting maybe RAW and JPEG or just JPEG, something like that.
Yeah, I went to both for a while. Then I realized I wasn't editing any of the pictures in RAW, so I left it. And then when I finally went to Lightroom, a friend of mine who's a news photographer talked me into going back over to RAW as well as shooting everything in manual. And you know what? RAW is by far the best thing I've done. It gives me a lot of latitude on the pictures to change the exposure after the fact, and it doesn't take me any more time to work on it compared to when it was in Photoshop. And you really had to go through each and every picture to convert it over.
Yeah, for me, my camera could take both JPEG and RAW at the same time. And I did both, and I would deal with the JPEG at first. And that's if people wanted images or something, I would then go back to the RAW and edit from the RAW. Because dealing with RAW and some programs it can be a little bit more time consuming, and I wanted to get through them fast. If I came back from a soccer game or a softball game or some sporting event and I had 200 or more images to go through, I wanted to be able to go through them fast. And once I got Lightroom, I got the trial, the 30-day trial for Lightroom, and I would say 15 to 17 days into the trial, I was convinced I didn't like it and I didn't want to use it. And I was going to, just stop using it. But something clicked somewhere along the way. And I decided, it just clicked with Lightroom, and ever since then I've loved Lightroom, and I completely stopped shooting JPEG. And actually for me, here I am with Jpeg2RAW, stopping, I always did the RAW, but stopping shooting JPEG was something that took me a little bit of convincing, and that's what Lightroom did for me.
It took somebody talking me into it, and I don't think, other than running out of room on a card once, I had like less than 50 pictures left. It kind of forced me, and I didn't have a spare card with me.
Yeah.
It forced me to go over to JPEG to get an additional like 75 pictures after that, turning that 50 into 125 pictures. But other than that, I don't shoot at all in JPEG anymore.
Yeah, and that's the case. Is that there are times, even if you're shoot JPEG, I would shoot RAW almost all the time, and there are times when you need to switch back over to JPEG for whatever reason. I find fewer and fewer of those, and like I said, with Lightroom, I can come home from a sporting event and go through all the images, pick the ones I like, do some very light editing, and publish them to SmugMug with far faster than I could have the old way with JPEGs. I've got that workflow down so fast now. And it's all with JPEGs, and with RAW. You and I were talking beforehand, before the show, that if you know somebody who is an educational, a teacher or a student or something like that, you can get Lightroom for under $100. Sometimes as cheap as under $70.
Right, and that's a $300 program on its own.
Yeah, and if you can get it for that price, there's really no other software you should get before that. That should be for photos. That should be your first piece of software you can get it for that price. Full price, and you're going to have to make a decision whether you want to go with something like Adobe Photoshop Elements or with Lightroom. I would always suggest Lightroom, but it is, at $300 a lot of money. For me, I have full Photoshop also, and I go into that far less. I probably go into that 5%.
Yeah, that's probably about what I'm in Photoshop now.
Yeah. So now you go through and you've picked out the ones you want. You've maybe edited some or not edited them. And how do you then share them? I can't imagine you're printing all these.
If I print 5-10% of my pictures, that's a lot. Sometimes my vacation pictures I'll upload to maybe something like Shutterfly to have printed. I always talk about how I want to put together a scrapbook. I have everything I need to make a scrapbook except the time to actually make a scrapbook. Mm-hmm. So the vast majority of the pictures that I like end up on Flickr.
Flickr, okay. Do you do any sharing on Facebook, or is it just mainly Flickr?
My wife will wind up putting pictures on her Facebook. I have a Facebook account, but I rarely go into it, and she'll wind up putting it on hers. I might put one or two, but Flickr is where I'll put the vast majority. And what I always like about Flickr, I always call it my secondary backup solution, because you can store the pictures at full resolution. So if something ever happened to my home computers where I lost everything, I could at least the pictures that I deemed previously important, I can get full copies of them, full resolution copies.
Wow, so you can upload the full resolution copy. Now, is this the converted JPEG, converted RAW into JPEG image? or what is this?
I'm probably uploading. I'm pretty sure I'm uploading DNG files. So Adobe DNG.
Okay. Well,
I have to. I got to look to see what I upload because now I don't even know what I upload because I do it within Lightroom. There's a
publishing.
There's a publishing, and I publish directly into. No, it's got to be a DNG because it's not converting those pictures. So it's Adobe DNG files that are going up to Flickr.
So talk about that for a second. So you take the raw image and then you're converting in Lightroom to DNG. And why are you doing that?
Well, in reading some of the guides on Lightroom, when you have a raw photo, it's creating two files. One is the image file, and then the other is a sidecar file.
Right.
So when I was reading through it, it says the best way to do it is using the DNG, which is a digital negative from Adobe, which takes those two files, merges them into one, so that you have all the data you need. It's still the raw picture with all the data, but it's one file.
Yeah. I've heard arguments both for and against converting to DNG. One of the arguments for it is that it's I'm not sure if it's open source. I don't think it's open source. But the thought is if you take the raw images that are taken by all these different camera manufacturers, you got a Sony, I have a Nikon, our raw images are not the same actual format. It's whatever proprietary thing our camera manufacturers are doing.
And some manufacturers have multiple raw formats for different cameras within their own lines.
Absolutely. I mean, if you own Photoshop or maybe even Lightroom 2, you'll notice that, okay, Nikon comes out with a new camera or Canon comes out with a new camera, and all of a sudden you've got to download an update for the raw features of that camera, and that's because they've made changes to it. DNG, I think, is much more standard. So my raw image converted to DNG and your raw image converted to DNG were much more similar now.
Correct, and that is open source. Adobe wanted to make that so that in 50 years from now, the format would be the same so that you don't have, and I always talk about it, how we went from the Stone Age to to all the ages in between, and now they call us a disappearing age, because think about some of the computer files you had from 10 years ago that maybe are on a 3.5 floppy. You cannot open, or 5 1/4 floppy. You can't open any of that anymore.
No.
Nope. And some of those, now JPEG will probably be around forever.
Yeah.
Just like an MP3, they're around. And Adobe wanted to make the DNG the raw standard format. And I think there are some manufacturers that actually their camera bodies will produce DNG on the camera itself.
And that is something to think about, because we started this whole conversation off talking about your dad and the photos that he took a long time ago.
Right.
Now he had hard copies of them, so as long as they weren't lost in a storm or in a move or something like that, you still physically had those things. They may have deteriorated a little bit over that amount of time, but you still had the images. The trouble with digital is, will you be able to open a raw file 30 years from now? That is
definitely questionable.
That's a question. And one thing I ran into is before I got the server set up I have here at home, I was backing all of my photos up onto CDs and then eventually on to DVDs. And when I got a DVD writer and I was taking all those CDs and I was converting them and writing them all to DVDs, I found a number of those CDs had now become defective, and some of the photos I couldn't get off of it. And they had only been written to the CD a few years prior to that.
Yeah, they talk about that CDs and DVDs don't last. I mean, if you buy a store-bought copy, it's a pressed DVD, so that one will last forever. It's the ones that we actually write that they talk about is like a 5-year lifespan, and most people don't know that. And you're right, I used to put a lot on DVD, but now I have a server that I back up all my pictures to, plus a separate hard drive, which I keep off-site, so that I have multiple copies, and probably way too many copies now, but can't have enough.
That's true, and so that's something to think about. If you're storing backing up everything onto DVDs, that's not going to last nearly as long as what you think it will. Okay, so and I have some stuff up on Flickr, not nearly as much as you do, and jpeg2RAW has some stuff up there on Flickr. Also, Flickr's a good solution. Like you said, you can upload these full-size images. Now, can people get to your full-size image?
Yes, they can.
Okay, so you wouldn't want to put anything up there that you might want to sell at some point.
Yeah, I haven't gotten to that point of worrying about it, but yeah, if somebody wanted to, they could actually go on there and download the full resolution copies of mine. I think I could block that if I wanted to.
Yeah.
But I haven't done that. I mean, I use it seriously. I actually wound up using it more for a secondary backup off-site.
Yeah. So that's where a lot of your friends and family will go and check out the photos.
Right. I'll send a link to because I'll create a collection or a set, and I'll send out a link to the set so they can see all the pictures. Like I was in a dance competition a couple of weeks ago down in Orlando, and I just sent it out to the club members so they can just click on it and see any of the pictures. And they can actually, if they wanted to print off pictures, they can do it straight from Flickr as well, where Flickr will print it and send it to them.
I didn't even know that. So Flickr will, I imagine they charge you a fee. So Flickr.
Yeah, there's a fee for it.
Flickr will print these for you. Do you know what printing service they use, or do they have something of their own?
You know what? I used to know it. I haven't printed from them in a while now. I'd have to look again, but I don't remember what their.
That's very interesting. The prices are reasonable.
They're the same as most other places.
Okay.
Like a Shutterfly or something.
Right. That makes it very convenient. Yeah. So I haven't done much of that. Most of my sharing has been on Facebook. I go out there and put some stuff on Facebook. I do have a SmugMug account where I put some stuff there. And then most recently, I've been moving more and more over to Google+. Now, Google+ is not a replacement for Flickr. Flickr is a photo site. You know, that's its main devotion, is that. Google+ is sort of like a Facebook. Have you been on Google+ at all?
I started to open an account last week, but then I didn't finish it. I wanted to actually get a picture up there of myself, but I'm going to be on Google+ probably in a week. My brother-in-law sent me the link to it to invite me.
Yeah, right now it is restricted that you have to have an invite to get in, but I think there's something like 20 million people in it already, so it shouldn't be hard to find somebody with an invite. Anybody out there who doesn't have an invite, email me at podcast@jpeg2RAW. Podcast at novstudios.com, and you can find it here on the website too. Email me and I'll send you an invite. There's a lot of photographers that are on there. I think right now, if you go on Google+, it is not so much open as like a Facebook, where you've got all everybody from the pros all the way down to your parents and your cousins and everything on Facebook. So I think there's always going to be a kind of a place for Facebook. Google Plus right now is a lot of very, very good photographers and a lot of technical people. So it's an interesting place to go to if you're into photography, to go in there and follow some of these photographers. You talked earlier about the limits of cameras and taking the range of brightness and luminosity. So I think you're hitting on HDR images.
HDR pictures, correct.
Yeah, and in my mind, the king of HDR is Trey Ratcliffe. Have you followed him at all?
I've seen some of his pictures. Yeah.
To me, he's the king of HDR, and he will, on I think almost weekly, maybe even more so, have a Google Hangout. And Google Hangout is sort of like a Skype conversation. If you ever use Skype, you can have up to 10 people here in the Google Hangout, and everybody can talk. So he'll just open up a public Hangout, and people can just come in. He doesn't have to call them; they'll just come in, unlike a Skype conversation. And it is limited to 10 people. And if you're one of the 10 to get in, bam, you're talking to Trey Ratcliffe.
Yeah, that's amazing.
It is amazing. Yeah. Now the problem with somebody like Trey Ratcliffe, he has so many people following him that if you didn't know the exact time he was doing it, and you're 2 minutes late, you're probably out of luck.
Right.
Because his room's going to fill up that fast. But okay, before we end the show here, do you have any advice for somebody who's going to be traveling that we haven't gone over already, maybe, or just want to rehash something?
Well, a couple of things that I always, especially down in Disney, it's all about location, where you're taking the picture. And one of the best tips that I wound up doing is, if you're going to go there, try and get an early morning breakfast within the park, or do a tour where I got a picture of Main Street with nobody on it. Now, you can imagine Main Street USA in Disney has always got probably 1,000 people on there, and I was able to get in there at 7 a.m. when there was absolutely nobody on Main Street. So you can try and find when can you go there where there's going to be nobody there, so you can get that picture that nobody else really gets.
Yeah, I wish I'd have found that one. That is an awesome tip. That if I'd have found that one, I would have put it up there.
And then the other tip that I found a website a couple of years ago. It's called Blue Hour Site, and it talks about the time of day when the sky is. You're taking a picture, and you may not need a flash, or if you're using a fill flash, the sky will be a deep blue, and it bases it based on your zip code and the date you're going to be there to give you like a 45-minute window of when the pictures are best. And when I was down in Disneyland last time, it was like 6:45 or 7:45 to 8:30 was the best time, and that's when I get some of my best pictures of the castle or some of the surrounding buildings, because you got that deep blue sky against a very pleasing shot of the castle.
Okay. I think a lot of people have heard of Magic Hour. How does Magic Hour line up with Blue Hour?
It's the same thing.
Okay, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for anybody who's listening to this later, if you don't know what Magic Hour is or Blue Hour, it's like what Tim just described. It's that last little part of the day where the light is just beautiful.
And the picture you have on the screen right here is probably close to that hour.
Yeah. This is, it definitely is the end of the day here. And it's small.
10 minutes later, the sky would have been completely black.
Yeah. And that's the thing. You've got to be ready for that shot. Yeah. You notice I put your name up there now, huh?
Yeah. Yes, Tim.
I should have done that a long time ago, because I think, unfortunately, JC misspelled your name earlier. Put an E at the end of it. And that's one of the things we're using now is live stream, where I can put in the little lower thirds, and it adds to it. We've had trouble, and if you're watching this live and you expected to see Tim and I, we've had some trouble with the sync. So I would be talking, and a few seconds later my mouth would be moving, and it's very distracting to watch. But when you're doing this with us, especially in a photo podcast, you're not so much caring to see Tim or I. You're caring more to see some photos as we talk about them, and that's one of the benefits come out here in live shows. You get to see some of the photos as we talk about them. Before we end the show here, does anybody out in chat have any questions for Tim or for myself? JC, or I'm not sure who Rogue Wave is.
I'm going to put a link on there to my my Flickr pictures as well, in case anybody wants to.
Yeah, and after the show, I'll record this, I'll put it out, and I'll have a show notes for this for everybody. Listen to it now or listen to this later. Taped or recorded. I have show notes with a link to Tim's photos, and a lot of the photos that we've talked about here, I will also have in that, and some other links and descriptions there. All right.
I looked at Flickr. It's Snapfish that they use for printing the pictures.
Yes, and Snapfish. Most people have heard of Snapfish. It's very good.
Exactly.
Very reasonable priced thing. I never really looked at that and looked at where you can print it. One of the cool things I like about it is you can also, as you find other photos within Flickr that you really like, you can make them a favorite or something like that. So you kind of, even though they're not your photo and you don't have any real control over them, you can then put them into, your own little album where you can view those.
Well, I'll tell you, one of the favorited pictures I have on there is a picture of my son Jack with Alice in Wonderland, and I think it has probably like 1,500 views, and it's like just a normal picture, and it's like what is with this picture that everybody's looking at it, and you'd be so surprised what people like.
Yeah, so that's your photos are public there, right?
Correct.
Can you lock them down to where only certain people can see?
Yeah, you can lock them to friends and family, but I usually I leave it open, and because I want people to see my pictures. A lot of people always said, "Oh, I never get to see the pictures you take. You take thousands of pictures. I never see any." So I put my good pictures up there. It makes it much easier for me. So I'm not printing off a lot of pictures, and then at the same time, everybody's got an opportunity to see it.
Yeah, and people can make comments on it and stuff like that too. And Chris out in chat was saying, Flickr should only be your best prints. And there's another place, Flickr I think is turning into more of a in some ways, you got a lot of people who put out really good stuff, but also is in some ways an alternative to Facebook, where people are putting up a lot of stuff. So another place where people seem to be putting up just, the cream of the crop is 500 Pics. Have you seen that?
No, I haven't seen that.
I have not. I don't have an account there. I don't have anything up there, but they have some really incredible photos there. But I keep coming back to, I spend now more of my time on Google Plus, and if you follow, I have a number of photographers I'm following there, and some of those images they have over there are just outstanding.
Right. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, check it out. Is anybody in chat, Chris, Rogue, or JC on Google Plus?
Suddenly, chat got very busy.
Yeah, and Tim, you say you have a pro account over at Flickr.
Correct. Because
Okay.
I think there was a 2 gigabyte limit per month, so or something like that. It was a small amount, so I wound up going into the pro account. I think it was like $49 for 2 years, and you can put up as many pictures as you want for them at a time.
Yeah. And so the 2 gig per month, is that number of images you can upload?
Upload per month.
Okay. Yeah, so for some people that may be fine. For others, that may not be nearly enough.
If you're using a digital SLR, you're going to blow past the 2 gig easily.
And especially if you're uploading full-size images, if you're not shrinking them beforehand, you're going to go past 2 gig pretty fast. We were just talking earlier about a 16 gig card. So,
right, exactly.
Right, it doesn't take long to eat up 2 gig within 1 month if you're uploading full size. And I think JC and Chris are both asking something about Google Plus, and I think JC was asking what. Think about it as just like sort of like a Facebook. And I don't want to get too much into Google Plus here because this is not really about that. But it's on Facebook you've got to ask somebody to be your friend, and I'm sure there's a way to organize the people into groups or something. I've never really done that, but on Google Plus, you have circles of friends, acquaintances, people you follow, and you just follow whoever you want to follow. They don't have to accept you or anything like that. So I can follow, Trey Radcliffe, who's an HDR photographer, and he doesn't have to accept me. Now, when he goes to post something, he can post it to public where everybody can see it, or he can publish it to certain circles of whoever he has in certain circles. So if he had a family circle, he could post something just to that, and only those people would see it, or he can publish it to the whole group. So it's very interesting. Right now, if you're following all these photographers, there's a lot going on. Trey also not only does he have the Google Hangouts once a week, but he's posting different videos on how-to. He posted a how-to video on a HDR image that he took in Iceland.
I think I was listening to him not too long ago on another podcast as well, and he's pretty interesting.
Yeah. All right. Well, Tim, thanks for coming out, and hopefully, it sounds like your weather's getting a little better up there. You're not quite as warm maybe now as we are.
We definitely cooled off a little bit.
I'm hoping that after tomorrow's 100-degree temperature, we'll start to cool off a little bit. We have to get you back on a show at another time when you have some time. But, we talked today mainly about travel photography and went into some of the Flickr and some other things. But you also do a lot of sports photography with your son and in other cases. And I'd love to talk to you about that in a different show.
Absolutely.
So we'll have to set something up and come out again for that. Thanks for coming out tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Yep. All right, guys, that's the end of the show.
Thanks for joining in, everybody.
Yep, thanks for joining in, everybody.